Good afternoon. Welcome to the Canadian Embassy in Berlin. So, sehr geehrte Frau Bundesministerin PAUS, sehr geehrte Frau RISSENBEEK, sehr geehrte Frau ROHM, sehr geehrte Frau de Andreas, dear panelists, directors, producers, and filmmakers, chers amis, liebe Gäste. I can't tell you how wonderful it is to look out at this crowd. And I've been told that we have about 60 countries represented here. Just very, very impressive. Built our own little mini United Nations right here in Berlin for Berlinale. It's wonderful. And I even see that we have a couple of gentlemen that have joined us. Bravo, monsieur. So let me introduce myself. My name is PATRICIA ELLIOTT, and I'm the Minister-Counsellor here at the Canadian Embassy. I run the Commercial and Economic Affairs section, and I'd like to say straight up, the ambassador would have loved to have been here, but he's currently in Munich with our Minister of Foreign Affairs and our Minister of Defense for the Munich Security Conference. But he will be back tomorrow afternoon, so if you are coming to the event tomorrow night, you can have a chance to meet with him. But it is my great pleasure, and that of my colleagues from the Public Affairs section, to welcome you today. And right off the top, I want to express my gratitude to the team of Power to Transform for their tremendous work in organizing this event, as well for taking on the mission of addressing sexism and misogyny in the film industry. A huge, huge thank you to the St. John's International Women Films Festival and all other partners for their contributions to the event. And I'm particularly delighted to welcome Gail Maurice, as she is providing us a Canadian Indigenous filmmaker's perspective to the panel. So this is the second time that the Embassy of Canada has organized this global forum for women film organizations. And obviously, it's a huge success. And there's a lot of demand out there for having these type of conversations. And from all of us here at the Embassy, and for the Government of Canada as a whole, it's a priority to us that gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls in all their diversity is integrated into the facets of all of our work. We firmly believe that these topics deserve to be addressed at the highest levels and that they are brought to the center stage. I understand the discussion that took place earlier was closed door, and I also think that's important. You need to be in an area sometimes where you feel safe and you feel confident that you can have those type of discussions and you can talk with other people about it. And as part of Canada's feminist foreign policy, our aim is to advance human rights and gender equality. It's a key component of our overall foreign policy. We're keeping a very sharp focus on the transformational change and addressing those fundamental barriers and in those structures that prevent gender equality and reinforce discrimination. However, we recognize, and we know that you do too, that there's still a lot of work to be done. And no matter what sector we're in, no matter what part of the world, and apparently 60 different parts of the world, access to resources, access to capital is a challenge for women, for women-led organizations, and those institutions that are seeking to address gender inequality. So while I'm talking to you from my role, as I mentioned, I do commercial and economics, it's still our responsibility to implement Canada's priorities in the areas of inclusive trade, and we support women-led businesses. I also want to take a moment to speak about the creative industries, because that's who we have in the room, and the importance of cultural, effective, and clear diplomacy. So Canada's involvement in programming activities linked with Berlinale showcases the ways in which cultural diplomacy is a key pillar of Canada's foreign policy and contributes to deepening and strengthening the German-Canadian relationship. We all know that cultural diplomacy builds bridges between countries through fostering a greater understanding of our cultures, our languages, our art, costumes, and by connecting people's hearts and their minds. And films, especially, are a window into a much wider world that's out there. They can take us to new, undiscovered universes and put us under the skin of someone who is very different to us. And films also reflect our society's attitudes and their sentiments, which were repeated, reinforced. But who has the resources in any given society to produce a film? How diverse are the writers? What stories are being told, and from whose perspective? All of these questions matter greatly, and they were front and center at last night's opening ceremony. And this will form an important part of the dialogue made possible by events hosted by Canada and the many, many German and international partners here at Berlinale. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing from our keynote speaker and our panelists to hear your perspectives on how we move forward. How do we build on what we've achieved and we continue to move that dial forward? And so that we see much more innovative and diverse stories on that big screen. So I'm looking forward to the dynamic exchange with all of you during this event and then the reception that will follow. Je vous souhaite une excellente conférence and vielen Dank für Ihr Aufmerksamkeit. I always get this word wrong. Aufmerksamkeit. I forgot the kite. Pass the floor over to Ms. ROHM, Barbara. Over to you. Thank you.
Minister-Counsellor, thank you very much for following us up to be your guest again this year. And thank you for your great support in preparing for this event. Thank you so much for this. And I would also like to extend a warm welcome to, I would also like to extend a warm welcome to you on behalf of my fellow board member, Yvonne de Andres. Thank you so much for our work. We have great cooperation partners for this event. This is St. John's International Film Festival, Jan Brown, please show up for a moment, and with International Film and Television. So Susan Lilly, I think she's out for a moment, she told me. Then Eva, European Women's Audiovisual Network, Ana Maria Antocci and Alexa Munoz. Are you here? Hey, hello. Federal Foundation of Gender Equality in Germany. Lissy Meyer is here. The director, thank you for coming. And of course, Women in Hollywood, Melissa Silverstein. Melissa, where are you? You should sit here. And CIMA, Asociación de Mujeres Cineastas y Medios Audiovisuales. The more I say, the better. Craftworks UK. This is Elizabeth McIntyre and Rebecca Del Tufo, partners in crime. Working in film and television South Africa, Sanela Mthembu, who is really a great partner. She cannot be here this year, but MINENHLE LUTHULI is here as a panel guest later. You see the logos here, but I think it's important to make all these great women and their work visible. And the Global Forum does not only consist of this public part. We have already met beforehand for an exchange, and I'd like to introduce who is here today. PATRICIA. Okay, thank you for coming. So why did we choose the title Post-Heroic Storytelling? Moving beyond the male gaze and reimagining the female gaze for today. For change to happen, it is not enough to count women and people from other groups who have experienced discrimination and then complain that we are not seeing progress. Sexism and discrimination are firmly anchored in the DNA of the system. That's why it doesn't help to make small adjustments here and there. We need to look at why certain types of films are successful with decision makers and others are not. This concerns the stereotypical evaluations of film material on the part of decision makers who often devalue stories about women as trivial, emotional, and domestic, and see stories about men as epic, universal, and of great importance. Concerns the distribution of funds. We need mandatory measures and quotas where public money is involved. It concerns the working conditions behind the camera, which make it impossible to reconcile family and career, and which entail a systemic risk of boundary violations. We see this in the incredibly high numbers of sexual harassment and violence. It affects the stylistic devices and imagery that serves the male gaze. Last year, as a part of the Global Forum, we showed Brainwashed Sex Camera Power by Nina Menkes. Her film deciphers the patriarchal narrative codes that are hidden in supposedly classic shots and camera angles. It's like the elephant in the room that nobody sees. Light, visual effects, angles, and the choice of framing seem to glamorize women, but in reality they are objectified by these means. This visual grammar of cinema has also other dimensions. It helps to legitimate, and reinforce the male position of power. It supports the discriminatory conditions in the film industry behind the camera and influences how we view women in everyday life and how women see themselves when they look in the mirror. It concerns the narratives of historical events in which women and people of marginalized groups are missed. Furthermore, they are written out of the collective history of humanity. And it affects the dramaturgy of films and patriarchal narratives. From the book The Hero with 1,000 Faces by myth researcher Joseph Campbell, a kind of recipe has been developed in Hollywood named The Hero's Journey. This hero's journey serves the narrative of strength and competition, and often the old patriarchal narrative on an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But the whole concept of competition and domination of the world leads more and more to scarcity. When we look around the world, which is dominated by wars and crises and the exploitation of nature, then it's time that we use this powerful tool of filmmaking to tell other stories. In my work, I'm often asked whether there's a female gaze as opposed to a male gaze. For me, female gaze is not a concept that can be applied. It is a space in which women and people of other marginalized groups are not exploited by the gaze of the camera, but in which we look at others with empathy, with the help of the camera, and in which it is about connection and not exclusion. The industry talks about the need for innovation and diversity. Innovation comes from the edges. Innovation arises when we change narratives. We find these narratives among people who have so far mostly been excluded from filmmaking and big budgets. But their experiences are valuable. Their wisdom is perhaps the most valuable thing that we have for storytelling. When they can tell their stories, we start to change mindsets with this reality machine that is filmmaking. As soon as we manage to open our hearts to them and their experiences, we can discover the universal melody of being human, because this search for the universal melody of humanity connects the people who tell the stories with those who watch them. Thank you. Dear Minister PAUS, we have enjoyed many years of successful cooperation with your ministry, and we would like to thank you for making this event possible. Please join me in welcoming the Federal Minister for Family Affairs, Senior Citizens, Women and Youth, Lisa PAUS.
Thank you very much. Fellow campaigners, dear Ms. ELLIOTT, Ms. RISSENBEEK, Mrs. De Andres, and Mrs. ROHM, it is a great honor and pleasure for me to be here with you today at the second Global Forum for Women Film Organizations. It is great to see so many motivated and confident faces, faces of women and some men who want to and will change something. At a film festival full of stories and vision, it is vital to ensure that all voices are equally heard and women are given the same opportunities as their male colleagues. Distinguished filmmakers, masculine superheroes that are brought to the screen by cis men behind the camera, male narrative perspective and views. All these are examples of the patriarchal view dominating our culture. And although women are not a minority, they continue to be often marginalized in film. Women are seen from a perspective that is symptomatic of their structural discrimination. In the past few years, women's image on the screen has changed. Female roles have become stronger and more complex, and have broken gender stereotypes even in commercial mainstream cinema. But still, there is still much room for improvement. So, how can we go beyond the traditional male gaze and promote post-heroic storytelling? I'm excited to learn more about this in the upcoming discussion. This year's Berlinale also sends an important message by presenting auteur films, not only by women, but also by other marginalized groups such as indigenous women filmmakers. This message is not only a matter of justice, it's also an investment in the festival's cultural diversity and its creative potential. Women networkers, as a feminist and a minister for gender equality, I want to point out problems, but more importantly, I want to tackle these problems at the roots. At a time of multiple crises, a struggling economy, an alarming rise of right-wing extremists in the polls, I say, now it's time to deliver on gender equality, exactly in these times. Now, more than ever, when, if not today, who, if not us? Our goal is nothing less than achieving true gender equality. My ministry and I are working tirelessly and are doing all we can to make this reality. This includes taking a holistic feminist view on all areas in politics and in society. One thing holds true for culture and for film. More visibility of women, more diversity, equal rights. This can only be achieved through an intersectional, feminist, cultural, and film policy. Now is the time to use the right political levers to include more perspectives and fair structures in the cultural landscape. And these levers are the 3 R's: resources, rights, representation. To keep my speech short, I would like to name only a few examples. Let's look at resources first. Of course, we must close the gender pay gap. Because also, and especially in performing arts, this gap still is massive and stands at a scandalous 32%. And we also need to take a close look at the funding system. That is exactly the plan of the Federal Government Commissioner of Culture and the Media, Claudia Roth, my colleague. This week she did present her proposals for a reform of film funding. The aim is to create structures that will provide for effective cultural diversity, equal opportunities, and sustainability through targeted funding in diversity. Let me now turn to rights. To put it clearly, women must get half of every pie, but also protection from violence, the abuse of power, and of sexism. Since the Me Too movement began in 2017, many things have changed in the film industry and also in German society and other society as well. But again, there is also much that still needs to change. An unbelievable 44% of all women in Germany experience sexist attacks in their daily lives. When this finding from a study was presented to us at the Ministry of Family Affairs, it was clear to us that we do have to act, collectively and as society. And that is why a year ago, I did launch the Together Against Sexism Alliance. The alliance includes, right now, more than 550 organizations, companies, and institutions, and also the Federal Cabinet of Germany. And they all have committed themselves to resolutely opposing sexism and sexualized violence. And I must say I'm a little proud of it, because this alliance makes us a pioneer in Europe, and I hope that many countries will follow our example. I warmly invite you. Join the Alliance Against Sexism and help make our network even stronger. Finally, a few words to representation. Quotas. Quotas do help to increase women's representation where voluntary action fails to do so. We all know that. In management and supervisory boards of big companies, we can see that quotas work. In the film and TV industry, women should make up half of the members of juries and selection committees that are publicly funded. Same applies to professorships at film universities. And we also need strong alliances and people leading the way with courage when it comes to representation. Germany, for example, it is thanks to actor Maria Furtwängler and her Marlisa Foundation that we have studies and data on the representation of women in film and television. And this allows us also to ensure in a targeted way that stereotypical images of women, but also of men, change. Images we are exposed to every day on TV, in cinemas, music videos, the media. So, resources, rights, representation. These are the levers on the road to gender equality. We can also see at the international level whether we are really focusing on the right aspects, when we can do so thanks to the G7 dashboard on gender gaps. The dashboard of the G7 countries is our first joint monitoring mechanism. It enables us to continuously review the efficiency of gender equality measures taken in the G7 countries and in the European Union. Over time, annual reports help us to identify what works well and what we need to work on harder. Distinguished filmmakers, many of you have already achieved so much by joining forces to form strong networks, such as Power to Transform, Pro-Quote Film, and other quota initiatives. Let us build on the momentum and the message of this festival and continue to work hard to ensure that film and television will be as diverse as our society at all levels. I thank you for the change you are making. But once again, when, if not today, who, if not us? Thank you very much.
Delighted that MARIETTE RISSENBEEK, Executive Director of the Berlin International Film Festival, is here today. Dear MARIETTE, this is your last Berlinale in this function, and you have always supported our cause for more gender equality, even though we all know that there is still a long way to go. We would like to thank you very much and wish you a successful festival and all the best for the future.
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me again to the second forum. And thank you also very much, Lisa PAUS, because I really appreciate your speech very much. You summed up so many things which are important for women and also taking steps into the right direction. It really was for me very impressive. And maybe we stay in touch because I feel like we should join forces also for my future after the Berlinale. Post-heroic storytelling was the topic which I was told was what the forum is about this year. And I thought that was actually quite challenging. The world around us is so complex right now and has so many conflicts, wars, that it seems people are more looking for heroes instead of non-heroes. At the same time, I think it's quite dangerous to look for heroes, because when you look for heroes, you look for people who can tell you what is right and wrong. You can feel like, I follow this person because he knows or she knows what's right. And I think our world is more complex than thinking in black and white and right and wrong. So I do feel that women with a more complex structure, with a more complex perspective on the world, have a better chance than men to maybe guide us through these rocky times which are around us. So I think being female or being not male, let's put it that way, helps us in defining more where do I position myself, where do I want to go, and which perspectives can I include in the way I look at the world and in the path I want to develop. It might be a bit harder work, but I think women are not afraid of hard work. I think women are working harder to make things work. So in the end, I think we have the better chance, as I already said. And when I travel to festivals around the world, I see a lot of women working either as festival organizers, as festival directors, or working in industry programs. And it's rather women who make things work and who put things together, who are willing to sort of step back from their own position and sort of feel that they need the right people to make the film business work and not see themselves in the first place. So I think that's really the way I look at the world and in the way I want to work. And I'm very confident that the non-heroic behavior, the behavior of placing yourself in the second position and seeing what you can achieve and how you can achieve it, is the better way. I don't want to say much more than that because I didn't have much time to prepare my speech. And I think I'm very happy that the Berlinale is a platform where so many women organizations gather and come together, and that it was like the best way for you to organize this here. It also shows that the Berlinale is very diverse, includes many perspectives, many countries, and many organizations. At the same time, seeing all these women here in the room, I would encourage you to also think more about your own value, about your own expertise, to be brave in a way and not to think, oh, I cannot do this or I cannot do that, or maybe this person can do something better than me. I think to believe in yourself and to believe in your own strength is a really important part also of our work. And I hope at the Berlinale you can find some spaces to discover yourself, your own qualities and your own way of working. So you are allowed to work. You are allowed to make mistakes as well. By the way, you don't always have to be perfect. Please believe in that as well. And I hope you find in the next 10 days a lot of other people who join you on this path, and who will make this world a more equal world in the near future. I wish you a lot of courage and a lot of good encounters, and I hope you enjoy the Berlinale as well. Thank you for being here.
What I can say about our next guest is a very incredible biography. Joey Soloway is best known for creating, producing, directing, and writing the acclaimed Amazon original television series Transparent, for which they were nominated for 5 Emmy Awards, winning 2, and 3 Golden Globes, winning 1. Overall, the show received 24 Emmy nominations and 8 Emmy Awards during its run. Transparent made history as the first streaming series to win a major award as Best Series. Other awards include Best Director at Sunday Film Festival in 2014 for their first feature, Afternoon Delight, as well as Peabody, BAFTA, and SAG Awards and nominations for both Transparent and the iconic feminist cult series I Love Dick. They is currently co-writing a Transparent musical with her sibling Faith Soloway and MG Kaufman, which is set to open on Broadway in fall of 2024. They is also currently partnering on the South Commons Experiment, a documentary feature about growing up in a racial utopia in Chicago's South Loop. Joey is co-founder of 50/50 by 2020, an artist empowerment network and strategic initiative of Time's Up. They launched the Disruptors Fellowship, which is awarded to 10 artists of color who also identify as trans and or non-binary, disabled, undocumented, and or formerly undocumented. But what I can also say about Joey is this. When I started working as an activist more than 10 years ago, I came across a website called Wi-Fi TV. And there I read an article by Joey where they talks about waking up at night and wondering if they're allowed to speak up and if they really has something to say. When I read this article, it changed something in me, because in that moment I understood that this is something that accompanies and weakens women and people from marginalized group all the time. And I learned the power of realizing that it is not our personal failure, but that the difficulties we face are in the system. This article stays with me to this day. Thank you for this, Joey. It means a lot to me. And that's why I can't tell you how excited I am to welcome Joey here today. Joey, please.
Great. Wow. This is an amazing room full of people who are all already changing the world. So it's incredibly exciting. Great to see you all. I want to thank Jen Brown and Amelia Curran and Barbara, of course, from Power to Transform. When you asked me to speak, I was thinking about calling this speech Whither the Female Gaze. But then I thought, being in Germany, it would be Whither the Female Gaze. It's already confusing, the gaze, the male gaze, the female gaze. When you talk about the male gaze, people think you're talking about the G-A-Y-S. And in particular, male gaze, G-A-Y-S, are furious if they find out they're not the topic of conversation. So be very careful when you mention the male gaze around them. Tread lightly. So around 1975, about 50 years ago, Laura Mulvey coined the words the male gaze and the female gaze. And since then, everybody's really been wondering about whether or not a camera can have a gender. Can a camera have a penis? Can a camera be a penis? Good timing. Can a camera be a penis? Can a camera be a vagina? These are questions for another speech. When I came out as non-binary a few years ago, I realized that I was no longer female, nor male for that matter, and so neither of these gazes could I any longer claim. A few years ago, I coined the phrase the trans trickster gaze. I was talking about framing Agnes at Sundance. The camera's trans. It takes wild left turns out of nowhere, as does the logic. People have said that about my work. They've said vigorous beat changes. You never know what's going to happen. Trans gaze, the trans trickster gaze. I don't know. It's not that great. It's exclusionary. Only I and other trans people get to be the tricksters. No women, so that's not good. So I am going to submit a new name for our collective gaze. It's coming out here in Berlin. I'm gonna call it, it's not a great name. I just wanna prepare you by saying, I don't love this, but it's all we have right now. I'm gonna call it the other gaze. The other gaze. Again, not great. Not great for a revolution, but they're words. And as you said, the words that you read are keys. And in a room like this, I want to share with you some words that I read. It was about 15 years ago. I was standing in a bookstore at the magazine rack, which is just amazing. We should just stop there. That I went to a bookstore, that there was a magazine rack, that there were magazines. And I remember exactly where I was. I was in Los Angeles, in Silver Lake, at the Circus of Books bookstore, on the corner of Sunset and Hyperion. And I opened a magazine, and I think it was American Filmmaker. And it was about a woman who had just left the public relations business, and she had scraped together enough money for her first feature. The film was called The Middle of Nowhere, and her name was Ava DuVernay. And in this article, she said, filmmaking is a tool to wrest control of the power structure. The reason I know that is because I went back and Googled it. But I remember reading that article, and she also said, I'm just going to say that again because it's so meaningful. Filmmaking is a tool to wrest control of the power structure. And she said that for women and for people of color, protagonism is propaganda for our privilege. She said, protagonism is propaganda for our privilege, and our weapon is our art. And that was 15 years ago. That changed me. I kept going, is protagonism propaganda, or is privilege? It all made sense that these movies, these main characters, these actors, these directors, these writers were all reinstating their own privilege, reinstating white supremacy, reinstating male privilege, reinstating misogyny by simply holding on to the gaze, by having the gaze. Ava is more than just a filmmaker. She's an activist. She's a thought leader. The way she put words together changed me and created this spark for me that brings me here. She named the water. She named the air around us. She named the fact that at this point, let's just say it, the male gaze it's opportunity hoarding. It's opportunity hoarding. It's white men hoarding opportunities for themselves and people like them. That's what the male gaze is. And as my mom would say, very simply, she would just say, enough already. It's like a Jewish woman from Chicago. Enough already. What do I have to say about the male gaze? Enough already. Enough already. Enough already. Yeah, enough already. Like me, are worried that there are many great actors who have not yet gotten the opportunity to wear certain period glasses in certain period films. A lot of actors need to play guys in the 70s. They are so interested in The Godfather, they're making a documentary. Men need roles, they need costumes, they need glasses. I know I don't need a head start from these men who are making movies about the male gaze, but I guess I just wish that occasionally some of them would realize that those of us who were not assigned male at birth, those of us who were not assigned white at birth, in patriarchy and white supremacy, we don't have the access to the spoils of white supremacy and patriarchy. We're competing with these guys. The male gaze is a reification of their protagonism. I'm competing with them. I was assigned female at birth. I have no access to patriarchal privilege unless I want to put on a dress and walk on a red carpet. and be a doll. It's true. And if these men who are so thrilled to be continuing their artistic dreams won't recognize that they're actually perpetuating patriarchy with their protagonism of the male gaze, what's even worse than the male gaze is something that philosopher Lily Loughborough calls the male glance. The male glance is the response to women's cultural work that says, nothing to see here. No, nothing to see here. Loughborough says that the male glance is so insidious because it is quicker and more careless than the male gaze. It looks, it assumes, and it moves on. Lily Loughborough calls the male glancer closer to the amateur astronomer than to an actual explorer. Rather than investigate or discover or see, they point and classify, point and classify. And if any of you have ever been on a date with a cis man, they do a lot of pointing. I call these teaching dates. Be careful. If you are out at night, they will put one hand on the small of your back and they will start to point to the Big Dipper. Two things, whether you wanted them to teach you or not. So beware of cis men, especially those that are realizing that they will start to teach you about astronomy. So here we are, February 16th. Wikipedia, I hope you're listening. The Other Gaze was started here, and again, it's not a great name. It's a point of view. Actually, it's not a point of view, no. It's a prism. The Other Gaze is a prism of feeling seeing by anyone who is other. Other, it sounds better than cutie pock. We say cutie pock in LA. We say cutie pock. People say, could you get me a cutie pock editor? Could we make sure we have some cutie pock people on this project? It stands for queer or trans people of color. Queer or trans or people of color. Cutie pock. The problem was actually, though, that when older white men heard it, they got very excited and they're like, I want one of those cutie pocks. Somebody bring me a cutie pock. I think they thought it was like an ice cream bar. I need a cutie pock. I want 2 cutie pocks. And then an assistant was like, I'm so sorry to bother you. Cutie pock is actually a queer or trans person of color. I'd still like one. I'd like 1 or 2. I'd like 1 or 2 cutie pocks. But first, let me hire a few hundred more white men to investigate this cutie pock situation. We're going to have a panel on cutie pocks. But I do know I want one of these cutie pocks. They sound delicious. Oh, Hollywood. During Me Too and Time's Up, we learned that our studios and our streamers, the people we are begging for money, had so much more money to spend and had already spent so much money paying women to shut up about their stories. They spent millions, hundreds of millions of dollars asking women and people of color to put tape over their mouth when we, as assigned female at birth people, begged to be paid for our stories. They preferred to pay for us to hide our stories. They have paid us to lie. They don't want to pay us for our stories. That's what's happening in Hollywood right now. And if we do have any kind of feminist, I would love to do this study to force every studio and streamer to say, this is what we've spent on settlements for NDAs. This is what we paid out to keep people quiet. This is what we paid female screenwriters. I'm curious. I can't help it, guys. It's hard being an activist and trying to pull down a bridge as I'm trying to climb up it. I'm trying to make it and have the kind of career that the men in my age range have, but I'm also an activist. So I'm literally pulling down the bridge as I'm trying to climb up it, which is very trans. So that's good. So we're going to claim the male to combat the male gaze and to combat the male glance. We are going to name the other gaze. Not the other gays, G-A-Y-S, although I am looking for them. If anybody knows where they hang out in Berlin. The non-binary gays, the other gays. This time I am talking about the GAYS. And those would be the trans ones I'm looking for. So if you do know where they're hanging out, please do drop a pin later tonight. And as I wrap up and I think about a call to action, I want to ask cis men. Yes, you holding your camera, looking at photographs of me. You gazer. You male gazer, you. I want to ask you something. I want to ask you, are you willing to see that you are the problem? You are the problem. Why? Because we're living in this world of the male gaze, and men get a lot of shade standing under the clouds that are the male gaze. It's like your sunscreen. I don't have an end, but I have an almost end. But we are here to say those aren't clouds, they're smog, and we're dying. I'm just telling him, he's not listening. The men who are continuing to opportunity hoard the male gaze and calling it their artistic right to tell their stories, I'm just going to say that the other gaze demands that if you're not using your story to take apart white supremacy and patriarchy, and in fact reifying it, if you're not using your money, your tools, your studio, your script to take apart your privilege, to rebuke white supremacy and patriarchy, you don't get to call yourself an artist. You are not a revolutionary. You are not fighting fascism. You must stand against white supremacy and patriarchy. And men, if you want to make stuff, find ways to center others. You don't even have to tell people you're doing it. I'm centering others. No, don't do that. The last thing I want to say, because I don't really, this is my last joke. But then I just want to talk about the binary afterwards. When we say to the men that you're standing under the clouds, you are standing under the clouds of the male gaze that are providing cis men with shade. For us, those clouds are smog. We are dying. And when you say that to a man, most of the time he will say something to the effect of, I have no idea what you're talking about. Will you listen to my podcast? So again, be careful. Trying to bring this stuff up outside of this room. Barbara, be careful. They won't hear it. They can't hear it. But the last thing I want to do is talk about being a trans person and a non-binary person at a festival where the binary keeps coming up. I keep hearing people say it, like women are like this, men are like this, women shoot like this, men shoot like this. There are so many people between the binary. And I'm gonna talk last about Olivia Lang, who's an amazing writer and who wrote that actually fascism needs the binary. That the binary is the soil that allows fascism to take root, the creation of the other. So the last thing I want to say about creating the other gaze, we got this, Barbara, don't look sad, we're gonna do it. We're here. We're gonna remember that my words affected you and Ava's words affected me, and who knows when or where or how, but some of these words are gonna affect some of you. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, okay. So, and I would like to hand over to the moderator of the panel discussion, Manori Ravindan. She is Senior Contributing Editor, Screen International and Broadcast, and London Correspondent for The Anchor. And she's Chair of the Broadcasting Press Guild UK. Manori.
Thank you so much, Barbara and Yvonne, and my goodness, thank you, Joey Soloway, for that absolutely rousing and inspirational keynote. How on earth do we follow this from such an inspiration? But we're going to try, and we have a fantastic panel here today. Thank you, Barbara, for that introduction. My name is Manori Ravindran, and I'm a journalist. This is a dream panel for me, if I'm being honest, because this specific topic is something that is just constantly on my mind. Everything, especially as journalists. I used to work for Variety and worked in the trades for a very long time. Constantly looking at, we're taking in film and television always, and at the forefront of my mind is often, I just can't be bothered with some of these male stories anymore. It just does not interest me, and yet that is seemingly all there is sometimes, and it's very, very challenging. So this is a great topic, and we also have some terrific panelists to really illustrate some of these key conversations. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce people in the interest of time. First, I'd love to introduce Anna Hintz, who is a director, writer, and producer. Her amazing documentary, Smoke Sauna Sisterhood, has been a mainstay this award season. For those of you who have not seen it, it is one of my favorite nonfiction masterpieces of the last 12 months. She's a yes. She is from Estonia. I'm going to sit down as well. It is a group of fantastic women in Estonia who are at the sauna. This is, I believe, a UNESCO protected sort of cultural activity, and they are sharing the most intimate experiences. It's a beautiful film, which actually won the European Film Award for Best European Documentary. The Best Cinematography Prize from the International Documentary Association. And you also won a directing award at Sundance, didn't you, last year? So a huge congratulations and welcome. We also have, I'm going to invite MINENHLE LUTHULI, a screenwriter and director from South Africa, to join us here as well. MINENHLE's first short film was Get Ready With Me, which featured a woman sort of getting ready for a night out. And you are, MINENHLE, thank you so much. Please do take a seat. And MINENHLE is actually going to be going back and shooting her first feature film effectively next month. So this is a big few weeks. We are so grateful for you that you found the time to join us for this. Thank you. And finally, we have you saw a little preview of her before, but Gail Maurice, who is one. Please join us, Gail. That was amazing. But no, truly, Gail is one of Canada's national treasures. I don't need to tell some of you in the room here from the Canadian Embassy, but truly as an actor known for celebrated roles in films such as Johnny Grey Eyes and Night Raiders, which I'm sure a number of you might have seen more recently. She made her directorial debut with the 2022 film Rosie, which was a critical darling, premiered at TIFF, I believe, about an Indigenous girl forced to live with her reluctant Francophone auntie in Montreal, 1980s Montreal. And Gail is fluent actually in Cree and Michif, and does a lot of translation work in her films, which I think is a very interesting dimension that I'm excited to talk about. But I know that we have maybe not quite as much time as I would have loved, but we will go into our questions because this is just an extraordinary topic. There's so much to discuss, and really we'll probably really scratch the surface of it. But I'm curious to hear from each of you in terms of what post-heroic storytelling really ultimately means to each of you in your work thus far. Anna, did you want to sort of start?
Hello, everyone. I tell a personal story of that. Some years ago, 2 years ago, or 3, I was in Paris, and I had that deep calling to go to a museum. And it was called Museum of Primitive Arts before, but now they changed the name because it's politically incorrect. And I was there, and I recognized so many stories my granny used to tell me, and narratives that I grew up with. And I realized how much we have been dominated by certain narrative, only one type of narrative that we learn in schools, in universities, including film schools, and it's very Eurocentric. And it totally excluded my stories that I grew up with as something irrelevant, something not quite. And that was the aha moment when I somehow there with all these artifacts stolen from the places, like shamanic drums that are supposed to not be even seen are there. And I'm there and I'm reconnecting to the deep roots where I come from. And then I was like, no, I'm going to embrace all those stories. So there are hero stories in my granny stories also, but they're very different. Their heroes can be very vulnerable. They can be not strong in the usual concept of hero. And I think this is a big thing, big political thing that we all need to work for, that all these different narratives are reclaimed again, starting from what stories we tell to our children, what we teach at school, what we teach in film school. And then I was like, you know, inside me was this, the power to change was there.
And I believe actually we do have, why don't we sort of go down, then I know we have some, a trailer for the film as well. Perhaps actually, maybe it makes more sense to revisit that afterwards, but I'd love to hear everybody's answers first. MINENHLE?
I think for me, the game changer was, first of all, opportunity, where we hardly got opportunities to tell the stories that we wanted to tell. So when that door opened, or that just slightest crack in the door, we made sure that we were like water. We were just going to maneuver and get those opportunities to tell our stories. But also in getting the opportunity to tell our stories, the ones that came before us, they got the opportunity, but they never had the freedom to tell. It's as if you were given the opportunity, okay, you can be a woman director, you can be a writer, but still there's someone above you that's going to want to judge and maneuver and be like a puppet master to say, but these are the kind of stories that we want you to tell. So they were kind of like putting women in the forefront just for optics. And that also changed as well. And then the next thing after opportunity came freedom, which is when my generation of filmmakers in South Africa came in. So other than opportunity to tell the stories, we were also given the opportunity of freedom to tell the stories that we really wanted to tell and portray them how we wanted to tell them. So now that's why we kind of shifted how the heroes looked like, because now we had the opportunity and the freedom to tell who we think heroes are. Yeah.
It's brilliant. Can't wait to dig into that. Yeah. Gail?
My hero is my grandma, and she raised me. I'm Indigenous from Northern Canada. My little village is 700 people. It takes me 12 hours from door to door to get from Toronto to my mom's door. And inihta ni hiuiano samnohkomigiks nahamuetan sitä piikskuyan. Ego kispenu yakuta nipau uta uyak ayapu tanstohta tansumagattuyan tanipau. My language, there's 1,000 speakers. It's Michif, which is a mixture of Korean French. And there's only 1,000 speakers. My grandma taught me, and I use it in my films whenever I can. My next feature film will be a third in Michif, and I think it'll be the first feature film that will have that much Michif or any Michif in it in Canada. And I'm proud of that. And I tell stories because I want people to see my culture. I'm queer, and Rosie is a film to show that Indigenous people are everything. We're not stoic. We can be. We're funny as hell. We swear. My grandma was the biggest, knew the most swear words. We bring in penis, balls, whatever. And it's just, I want to break down stereotypes, you know. And I want also the people in my village to see my films, and for the young people coming up to be proud of who they are, their culture, their language, and to know that the world wants to see our stories. And that's why I tell stories.
Incredible. Because we do have the 3 clips, I think actually we'll just watch them sort of in order now to provide a little bit of an illustration. So why don't we start with Anna's Smokes on a Sisterhood first, please?
poeg sündis, siis tuli peremees majja. Aga kui tütar sündi, või.
Põhiline oligi see, et mehed sind tahaksid, sest siis sa oled väärtuslik naine. Ja ainus hea asi minu keha puhul oli see, et mul olid ilusad kissid.
C'est la fille à ta sœur.
Ma sœur adoptive.
Elle a personne d'autre. Si vous la prenez pas, là, elle va se retrouver dans un foyer d'accueil. Your auntie is so excited to take you home.
No. So, what's the plan, Stan?
Where's your mom?
Out there, she's a star. You live in a weird place. Why is there a pile of garbage lying in the corner?
C'est 3 mois en retard sur ton loyer.
Sweet. They'll have home too, but 4 more are letting us stay with them.
I have a home. Mama goes to ski. That's my reserve.
Look what I found!
Good job. J'ai même pas de maison. C'est toi, sa maison, là.
I don't want to live with you anymore. Take me back! I miss my mom. Why do you look so different than her?
Because I'm French and she's Indian. We were born from different mamas, but we grew up in the same house. Vous avez arraché sa mère à sa famille, puis vous m'avez arraché à ma famille. I'm sorry your mama went to the stars.
Maybe my mom will be looking down at me.
She'll always be in your heart, like she's always been in mine.
Come dance with me.
People throw away good stuff for nothing. I pick it up and I make beauty.
You guys can see why these amazing artists are here on stage with us today, because their work really embodies some of the things that we're talking about to an incredible degree. Anna, with Smokes on a Sisterhood, I almost feel as though what you're tackling in this documentary is really, I mean, I know some of you probably joined us for the lecture by Sharon Blecky, who really this is sort of her focus in terms of her work and post-heroic storytelling. But really seeing women in nature with community, it's less individualistic, it's more about the group. Was that sort of how does this work in terms of is it a conscious choice by you to really sort of take on a story like this that is about women, and how does that play out for you?
I think this kind of intimacy and in like what you see in film is possible because I'm a voice from within the community. So Smoke Sauna is a very spiritual place where women used to give birth, wash the dead, and heal for centuries. And I'm born to that culture. And yes, I wanted to transform this kind of safe space that is there into the dark cinema hall, so that you enter not anymore just to see a film, but you enter this kind of space. And And for me, one big challenge that's connected to the topics that we're talking about was their nakedness. We are all naked there. Nakedness is nothing sexual. We are sweating there together, bleeding, all different bodies, all different ages. Yet, having a degree in photography, I know very well that, yes, camera has a glance. It's never objective. It's never like innocent. So I was super scared because naked female bodies in society are so sexualized and objectified, like how to make sure that that non-sexual glance comes to the film. So I can just share how I did it, because I think how it's not just what stories we tell, but how we make films. The process is super important. And so, for example, I was testing with a cinematographer on my own body first to find that language and safety. And then I felt it's so important to show to these women, and also not all are women, non-binary, those people there who are naked, body and soul, how I'm capturing them. They need to know what is my visual approach. So I showed this material that I filmed on my own body first to them. And so they, like, it was very beautiful, honest process. And I think this is so important, and it was very revolutionary, because usually films are not done like that. Usually also you take licenses beforehand, and I refused to do that. Only in the post-production, when there was edit to show to the women, they had the right to say yes or no. So these things are very important to talk about. How we do films. Do we, do we take their voices away from the people that we film, or we empower them? Are we including them? So the circle is a way I feel to be alive and to make films. The circle that you mentioned, it's a different concept of living. It's a different concept of living and perceiving time and life. I think that's the way forward, because the way how we have done very linearly is not sustainable.
That's right. And that's sort of the main point of difference, right? In Joseph Campbell, and sort of the hero's journey, which is an arc, compared to the heroine's journey, which is a circle. And that's fascinating. And it sounds as though, were there sort of concerns as well once the film is out, and how it's received too, and sort of kind of framing the I guess the naked bodies that are featured in the documentary?
Yeah, it's actually incredible. I mean, first of all, we were, of course, very scared how the nakedness will be taken. And you can see, like in USA, for example, some salespeople were very like, no, nobody is, scary. But for me, it was also like in UK, very interesting to see that there is this kind of post-Victorian hangover and fear of naked body. And but it has been huge. And what was interesting is that so many people have seen the film so many times. I'm traveling with it, and there have been like at least 30 or something who have come to me and said that they have seen it like 6 times or more. I mean, it's like film is not even 1 year out. 1 year is out there. And I asked, like, what is that? Why you go there? Like, why would you go so many times? And they say that they go to that space. That it's really not anymore film, but they go to that space where they feel that safety, where they feel they can be seen and heard. They want to be part of that sisterhood, regardless of their gender. They want to be part of that community, and they deal with their own stories and their own things. And that is like something I really have now realized, the deep need and the lack of this kind of safe spaces all around us. That's like, yeah.
Absolutely, and that really comes through. Yeah. It's truly a sort of a transcendental experience watching this film, and that I think absolutely is conveyed. MINENHLE, I'm curious as well, with both of your films, and the short film and the film that you've described to me, that Some Mothers, I believe, right, is the feature film. And that film is about a woman who is able to go back in time and speak to her 16-year-old self, which is quite interesting. And these are sort of two very sort of introspective kind of topics that you're choosing for both. It's really about, and we've had a brief conversation about how they're sort of autobiographical in a way as well. What is your process like in terms of, I know obviously you've spoken previously as well about sort of trying to shatter stereotypes, which is so important with funding. That's another conversation probably.
Yeah. So I don't actually, how do I put it? I think my process is not a very conscious one. Like I don't go out thinking, okay, this is what is happening and this is how I want to fight it. I just tell, I'm going to go back to the freedom part. I just tell stories that resonate with me or that my everyday experiences. So in my everyday experience, really, I hardly think about men. I hardly think about hunger. I'm not a poor African, and that's not something that I resonate with. Not, I do need the money, but I'm not poor, I'm not an immigrant. So those are all the things that I hardly think about because I'm not them. So in me writing or just my process of just coming up with the stories that I want to tell, it's usually something personal that I'm currently going through. So when I get married, probably I'll write stories about married people, because for me, it's just like whatever stage that I am in my life, I always write out. It's like my diary entry. I'd always like to make films about them. So get ready with me. The clip that you just saw right now is during lockdown, I gained 30 kgs in 5 weeks. That's ridiculous. From about 69, by the end of COVID lockdown, I was around 92. And during the entire period of lockdown, I was always obviously in my leggings and t-shirts. And when the government finally gave us an opportunity to say, okay, now you can go to clubs anymore, whenever I tried to fit my clothes, nothing fit. Nothing at all fit. So when I got the opportunity to make the short film, I just wanted to make fun of that opportunity as well, because it wasn't a depressing one, but it was quite funny that every clothes that I'm trying to fit, they do not fit. Any wig that I try to fit in, at some point I'm like, I don't even like wigs anymore. I just want to go out with my natural hair. So I've kind of went through a phase where not just my body changed, but even the way I felt about certain things changed. And I wanted to make a film about that. So that is where I was coming from. And that is where I usually come from when I write films. So the next film that I'm shooting, Being You, that is about the woman that is going back to talk to her 16-year-old self. I always fantasize that when I make it in life, I'm sitting opposite Oprah or whatever, and they're asking me, because they always ask this question a lot. And she's probably asking me, so Minnie, and I would have won an Oscar that time. So I'm sitting here, and she asks whatever questions that she asks, and then they have this one question they always ask everyone, what would you say to your 16-year-old self? And I've heard that question so many times that I just really got inspired. I was thinking one day sitting that if I'm 30 years old right now, I'm not that old, and so I'm not very far away from my 16-year-old self. But even at this point, even though the years are not that much different, I've changed so much from the person that I was at 16. And if a person had to ask me right now, sitting here, what would I say to my 16-year-old self? There's a lot, I would say. There's a lot I would shout at that child, because I'm like, why were you so stupid at 16? And I was really inspired because even though I'm not a regretful person, but most of the things right now from where I'm standing, I just regret a lot of things that I did at 16. I was so stupid. I was really so stupid. So I just really wanted to make, again, a diary entry of what would I say, what are the things that I would change at 16, what would I say to my 16-year-old self? And because we are so different, she's a very perfect antagonist to my protagonist right now, because we'll be fighting all day. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's just realizing that you can't really change the past. I think that's just the conclusion that I came with while I was just thinking that as much as I hate that child, but I can't really change what happened. And some of the experiences that happened when I was 16 are what propelled me to become the filmmaker that I am right now. So yeah, my processes are introspective in that way.
Sure, of course. And also cut yourself some slack. I mean, 16 is it's a very young age.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about funding last time, which I think is quite interesting. Given so you're obviously based in South Africa, and I know that sometimes with funders, there's a specific kind of story that they have in mind, and unfortunately, I'm sure a lot of people in this room kind of come across this, where the money is attached to a certain framework and their idea of the kind of story that they want from a specific geography or a specific place or a specific person. Tell me a little bit about how that's affected your career to date.
That has. So I was lucky that it's these things. So I don't know how you got funding showing naked bodies. I don't think I'll get away with that in my country. So it's these things where you're not given the freedom. I'll always talk about the freedom because I think we really lack freedom. Is that as much as they say, okay, you can tell stories, but they still want to curate what kind of stories. And with my feature film as well, the problem is that it's in a world that's only inhabited by women, and you get questions like the same people that will be like, oh yeah, we need to decolonize these stories, we don't need men. They start questioning, so what are you saying? We are living in a world that has no men. What is happening? And sometimes funders don't give us the freedom to tell. They want to say they support whatever story that you want to tell from whatever world or region that you want to tell, but they still behind the curtain want to direct how. And it's been a difficult and it's annoying actually, but I mean, we maneuver. Yeah.
You've managed to pivot without
one way or another, the film's gonna get done.
Sure, without sacrificing the story.
One way or another.
Yeah. And Gail, I find your case so interesting because you're such a celebrated, incredible actor in Canada, and yet you also have pivoted in a sense as well with making your directorial debut with Rosie. Can you talk a little bit about how that, was that so liberating for you, having been, I know you were so involved as well as an actor in some of the films that you have worked on, but Rosie must have been a completely different level for you, I imagine.
Yeah, so Rosie was my first feature film, and it was TIFF Top 10 for 2022. And it's my first feature film, not for lack of trying. I did 9 shorts before that, and it's hard to get funding when you don't have, I guess, credibility that you've done something before. So finally, I did get funding for Rosie, and I thought, holy fuck. It's like, whoa, I'm doing my feature film. So my crew was mainly, there was a lot of women. There was like queer, indigenous mentees. I tried to have a set that was inclusive and also loving. It sometimes it wasn't, many times, but. What was your question?
The question was really just how you pivoted to become a director and how some of your experiences as an actor has informed.
So I also do acting. So when I was directing my actors, it was not easy, but I was able to communicate with them in a way where I recognize their vulnerability, because they're putting their souls and being completely vulnerable on camera, and I knew how to talk to them where they felt safe, and to be able to make a film that I wrote as well, direct, produced, and just to have that creative freedom to do what I wanted to do, without anybody else's input, it was really, really liberating. And also, there's 2 characters there, Flo and Mo. And what happened is I was supposed to shoot in 2020, I think it was, and then Canada shut everything down because of COVID. So I had 1 year to sit with the film. And during that time, though, people kept asking me, what are Flo and Mo? Are they trans? Are they drag queens? Are they this? Or are they that? And I kept, I might be going off on a tangent, but I kept fighting it. No, they're not that. So that 1 year, I had an epiphany, and I go, wait a second, I'm an Indigenous storyteller, I'm an Indigenous creator, this is my story, and in my language there's no gender, there's no him or her. That's why I couldn't wrap my head around putting a gender on Flo and Mo. So to me, they're just two human beings that love each other, love whoever they want to love, dress the way they want to dress, and people have a hard time with that. Like, they still want definition, right? So I think as an Indigenous creator, I don't know how to answer these things when people want me to define in the colonial word, right? So it's something I struggle with. So even with the description, you know, they always want this word. So I just say finally that they're two human beings that love whoever they want to love and dress however they want to dress.
That's fascinating. And also sort of your background as as an Indigenous creator working in this industry. It really, I mean, just Indigenous stories. I'm Canadian myself from Vancouver, but that sort of storytelling is really, it's something that I guess it's really speaking to what Sharon Blackie is talking about, in which her frustration with, some of the modern films and whatnot, and really having to look back to mythology, and certainly being from Canada, of course we grow up with this, but about community and the environment, and the stories don't have to be linear. They can be coming from many different sort of points. There's not sort of a circular rather than the arch.
Yeah, and Rosie, there's a lot of I think as writers, we put a lot of ourselves in the film, and there's moments in there that are from my life, and for example, I talk about the 60s scoop in Rosie's background with her mother not knowing her culture, and what I did is because all my films, culture is so important, and identity, and what makes you who you are. Is it your blood, or is it the culture you were raised in? And the little girl is put into an environment that's completely foreign to her, and that's why it's bilingual French and English. But and she is put into this world that she doesn't understand. Everyone looks different than her. There's signage that she can't read, and it's an homage to the children in my country that were taken away from their mothers and put into an environment that is completely foreign to them, and they're expected to thrive and survive. And I wanted to show a triumphant film and also a joyful film. So in my film, she not only triumphs and survives, she actually changes the lives of the adults around her in a positive way. And to me, I always say laughter is my warrior's cry, because there's always humor in my films, and there's a lot of humor in Indigenous films. And we've been stifled so much. The government tried to kill us and annihilate us, take our culture away. And I always say laughter, that's the best thing to get them pissed off, because we're still standing and we're still here.
I mean, as we sort of look towards wrapping up, I'm curious, the USC sort of Annenberg Initiative stats came out, a couple of months ago, and it was quite interesting, right? When we kind of think about okay, quantifying what we've seen in the last year, and one of the discussions that really has come to the fore is people looking at movies like Barbie, for example, right, and a few other examples, and thinking, oh no, actually, women on screen, it's all fine. Like we're doing great, but actually, the stats reveal a very different story, right? There's still a huge discrepancy in terms of a huge gap. How, when you sort of look at some of your peers in the industry and sort of see some of these films, how do you make sense of that? Like, why do you think it's so easy to sort of, for people to look at these movies, look at the box office, which of course is an enormous achievement, and yet there is such a gap. But it's sort of, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's so easy to think that there is progress being made. In some ways, I suppose that is. The box office is nothing to laugh about. And yet there is so much work to be done. And you're really out there doing that work. But there's a little bit of a disconnect between sort of the public perception of women on screen and behind screen and what's actually happening. Is that, how do you sort of try and, I guess, reconcile that?
We have to change systematically. I mean, I also connected with this pitching, for example, like how we already pitch and you are put into this binary world, for example. In my language also there is no gender. And I think that's the first start where we should reclaim the narrative. We should not go into the trap of like they seduce us to their narrative, but we should be, no, yes, I'm vulnerable, I don't know, I'm an intuitive filmmaker, I'm emotional. You know, because they have been like what they oppose me for, and then it's the big system that now with the Smokes on a Sisterhood I've understood. Journalists, so many journalists I've met in this year, a lot of them have been very looking at with a male gaze, yeah, and like who tell the narrative. You know, in all these different parts in filmmaking. And the change happens when we do the change systematically everywhere. That's where we change.
I also think, I think it also goes with, Barbie was a huge box office success, but how many films were out there by women in the last season as compared to the ones that were written and directed by men? So it's just obviously to close the gap as well in putting out the films that are actually made by women, so that we can also get a step closer to being the most watched, if I could put it that way. So yeah, systematic, as she said, the system also needs to change to allow more women narratives to be pushed out into the audiences.
It's a major reckoning and process, isn't it? And as you say, and it really is sort of everything from the journalists who are kind of asking the questions to sort of up top of the studio level.
I want to just say that it's this interpreting the narrative also. It's like I was just watching one film about indigenous culture, and there's the huge thing like who interprets that? We can make films, but are they interpreted? Are they actually seen and heard? You know, so it's super important.
The culture change that's also necessary alongside it. And Gail?
I think, yeah, just give us more money. Yeah. So I'm excited to shoot my next film in August. And it's interesting. Like I said, it took, Rosie was my first feature film. And no one took a chance on me, but because now it's successful, my second feature film, it got funding, and it's like unbelievable. Within a year, I'm shooting, my next feature film. But I'm just saying, give us money because we're freaking amazing. We're fucking talented, and we can do anything. And also highlight us in your festivals and there should be more female directors in, I think, every aspect of filmmaking, like the festivals. I don't know how many female directors are represented in the Berlinale right now, but at least 50%, I hope, is there.
Sadly, where it is an initiative. Obviously, in Europe, there was 50-50 for 2020, right? I believe there are some representatives potentially in the room, but there is, of course, that it wasn't necessarily met by that date. So there is a ways to go. And you're absolutely right. Nothing says money like money. So on that note, I will wrap up the panel, but thank you all very much for joining us. And thank you guys as well.
Thank you.